Welcome to the Armstrong and Getty Show.
Craig, the Obamacare lawyer, joins us. Craig's deal is this. He is an attorney. He is also an expert in benefits. What you do for a living, would it be safe to say, is deal with the relationship between the employer and the employed?
And the insurance company, yeah.
Right.
The trifecta.
So employment and benefits and that sort of thing. Which is actually something we've been talking about a little bit today. I know you had thoughts on which story was it? The salary thingy?
You guys hit on last hour, not on the salary thingy, but the domestic partner benefits.
Oh, yeah.
So as a quick reset, we had opposite sex people could get married, so many states, including California, created a legal vehicle called domestic partnership, whereby people of the same sex could unite and have many of the similar benefits of marriage, but not all of the same benefits and some different tax treatment, okay? Mm-hmm. So that was sort of, separate but equal, right? It was, you can't get married, but you can do this, and most states went ahead and did that. Now, people that are opposite sex can't unify for domestic partnership unless they're both over 62 and it's an old folk kind of care situation. Mm-hmm. It's a nuance. All right. So now you guys are talking about how the New York Times said, boy, companies might make people get married to keep their benefits. Well, the reality is I'm advising my clients that beginning in their first renewal next year, their first, in 2016, I think it's probably smarter than not to get rid of domestic partner benefits, because now in California, as an example, if you're an employer and you offer domestic partner benefits, what you are saying is everybody that works for me can get married. However, if you don't want to get married and you want to do this thing called domestic partnership, you can have a similar relationship with some tax benefits and some different treatment. Mm-hmm. But only you people that work for me that are attracted to the same sex can do that.
Right.
So now what do we have?
We have lawsuits aplenty.
We have discrimination against heterosexual people.
Because, obviously, if you live with your girlfriend and she doesn't have health insurance, you'd want to get her on your health insurance.
Right.
Yeah.
And then so an employer would actually be giving a benefit to some people that they're not giving to other people based on their sexuality, and that's illegal.
Of course, I don't even think you'd have to live with your girlfriend, or where there was no rule about that. You just declared it, right?
Oh, my God. How hairy would it be to try to establish rules for how much do you love her?
How long you been dating?
There were rules. You had to file with the state. You had to, I believe you did have to sign something about cohabitation and or support.
A government seal of approval that your boyfriend, girlfriend, lovely.
And just like a divorce, you had a 6-month cooling off period.
Wow, if only.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that logic is so powerful and inescapable, it's clear that domestic partnerships will be gone very, very soon. And fair enough. I know you were, as an employment guy, going crazy about the recent CBO report about employment and that sort of thing and the coverage of the mainstream media. What about that?
Yeah, the CBO regularly reports on Obamacare, as you guys know, and the CBO is the Congressional Budget Office. It's bean counters. It's accountants that work for Congress. They are as nonpartisan as you can get. Right. And their job is to score the cost of the law.
Right. The small matter of what's all this utopianism going to cost, which very few of us pay any attention to.
Right. So prior to the Supreme Court decision, the CBO came out and said, we're going to issue, this is just this month in June, they said, well, let's give an opinion. So they gave about a 30-page opinion saying, look, if we actually repeal Obamacare at this point, there would be 100 different implications over the next 10 years. Some of them would cost more. Some of them would cost less. And their words were, and I'm going to paraphrase, their conclusion was, it could increase the federal budget slightly. It could decrease it slightly. We just don't know. Mm-hmm. If forced to give an opinion, we think the net impact would be something like $130 billion cost increase to repeal Obamacare.
Okay.
But in that analysis, they also used a number of $335 billion, saying, well, taken in a vacuum without considering all the cost savers, it would cost $353 billion. Excuse me. Mm-hmm. So the news media, I just did a quick Google search on how the news media was reporting this CBO report, which was incredibly nuanced and mealy-mouthed and very much in the margin of error. We don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
You do a Google News research yesterday, just pulling up this report. The top 6 stories all have headlines like this. Repealing Obamacare would balloon federal deficits, $353 billion, CBO says. Obamacare repeal would add billions to federal deficit. CBO would leave millions uninsured and blow up federal deficits, which I just thought, wow, if you, like you guys have said a million times, if you don't read the news, you're uninformed. If you do read the news, you're misinformed, because the CBO basically said, we can't tell. It's in the margin of error.
Wow, that's interesting from a news media standpoint.
Yeah.
So what? How many people have gotten insurance under Obamacare that didn't have insurance before? What's the number? Like 10, 15 million people, something like that?
Yeah, you're right in there. The number, and there's some argument about some of these numbers, but it's probably somewhere between 12 to 14 million people have gotten insurance.
That didn't have it before.
And
how much does that cost in a year? To insure 12 million people?
That's a good question.
What are we paying for that?
Oh, if you're talking about dividing all the costs of it among those people, which is a perfectly legitimate way to do it.
Yeah, that's the way I've been looking at it. How much are we paying to insure 12 million people?
Well, to take a step back,
whole country.
Let me take a step back and just tell you, a good average for us to go buy those people an insurance policy per person would be about $500 per month per person. So
sure.
$6,000 per year if we were to just go buy that policy for them now.
Right.
But because we've created exchanges, we've created websites, I mean, we're way, way into the billions so far. I mean, it's costing a heck of a lot more than that to do what we're doing.
Right. See, that's where it breaks down to me. That's where it just doesn't make any sense.
Well, it reminds me of the stimulus, which spent $800 billion or whatever it is to generate 1 million jobs. And so it cost, whatever the number was, $750,000 per job or whatever insane figure it was, when we could have just written people checks for $100,000.
Yeah.
But, that's what people don't do. Well, there are some people who think the more the government spends, the better it is for the economy.
Money goes somewhere.
Right, exactly. It's the multiplier, et cetera, et cetera. Never mind that it's the most inefficient use of money you can find, but anyway. So anything else burning in your craw? There was a third...
the Supreme Court case last week. You guys talked about it a little bit. King versus Burwell, the Obamacare subsidies
Gay people
case.
can get married now. You aware of that?
That's right. Well, that's the domestic partnership.
Dude.
That's
Two
right.
dudes.
Yep, yes, they can.
Woo! Adam and Steve. Anyway, so Obamacare subsidies.
The Obamacare subsidy case is interesting because as that case approached, my conclusion before the decision came in was it's not going to matter. We had it on pretty good authority from our lobbyist in D.C. that if the decision came down, it was very likely the decision would have a clause in it that said the decision will not go into effect for maybe a year because you weren't going to kick people off of those subsidies that day.
Right.
And the GOP, it's on pretty good authority, the GOP was going to go along with the Democrats and say, we're going to pass legislation that would mean that we're going to punt this 2 years down the road to the next presidential election. So had the Republicans, quote, won that case, we would have ended up with the same result, subsidies until after the next election. And the reality, as you guys know, is whether or not the subsidies go on, whether or not Obamacare exists, is going to come down to who is controlling the Senate and who is president in 2016. Mm-hmm. If there's any split at all, if there's one Democrat in either of those places, Obamacare is here to stay. If the GOP gets a clean sweep, I think there's a better than 50-50 chance that Obamacare gets repealed and or tweaked significantly.
Well, there's a lot of talk from the president and others on the other side about it being woven into the fabric of America. How far down the road do we get before you just plain can't get rid of it? It'd just be too complicated. I mean, you couldn't realistically pass the sort of legislation to get rid of it.
I still think that's hyperbole. I think you could. So when we talk about how, let's just say it's 13 million people are now covered. In the federal exchanges, that's less than 7 million. It's only like 6 point something million. It's a lot of it is still Medicaid, and we could certainly keep that part of it. You could say, all right, people that are below this threshold can keep their Medicaid. You could phase out the exchanges over a 1 or 2 year period or grandfather those people in, for example. But the idea that you simply can't undo it, I just think that's an erroneous idea, because it's not that. What's going to happen anyway is it's insurance markets, and frankly, this thing is going to bankrupt itself by 2019, 2020 anyway. So we're going to be facing this same issue 5 years down the road when insurers are saying, we just can't do it anymore. Like, this is horrible. And so then as a country, we're going to be forced with some kind of a Medicaid, Medicare expansion to cover the people that are no longer going to have these marketplaces.
So like the lowest 75% of Americans will be eligible for Medicaid, that sort of thing.
Well, so maybe not quite 75, but yeah, exactly.
Well,
the lowest 50.
Craig, the Obamacare lawyer, is with us. Craig Gottwals. If you need his help, we'll have his contact info available for you. But how are insurance companies feeling about the whole deal at this point? Because I remember that there was a period where they were still smiling and talking nice when we both know they were screaming at the administration, saying, you better pass some sort of bailouts or we are out. What's the current feeling from what you've heard?
It's pretty mixed still. I think more than not, you're seeing them starting to sour on the fact that the bailouts are phasing out now. Next year's the last year of the bailouts. And if those bailouts don't get extended and we still see the age and the illnesses in the exchanges grow, which they are, I think you're going to see a louder clamoring from the insurance community saying, whoa, this isn't work. We got to do something more. Many of them who are still the biggest supporters of the exchanges are still being good soldiers, and they're still marching along and taking the subsidies and insuring who they can.
Yeah, I know there are some companies that are making a lot of money.
There are some companies that were better at this particular manipulation than others, and they're extracting more from the public wealth, as Governor Brown might say.
That's a good point. So they're better at manipulating the government, and that's how you make profit. Beautiful.
Okay. What percentage of people have a better deal with their health insurance under Obamacare? I can only base it on my own life and then the texts and tweets that I see. And I've seen a lot of texts and tweets from people whose costs have gone up. The only people I've only heard from, I think, 2 people who like it better, and they were people who didn't have health care. They're one of the 12 million that now get health care at a pretty good price. But other than that, is there anybody who's got a better situation than they had before?
Arguably, there's a few. There's a few people that might say, I like that when I go to the doctor, I don't pay a preventive copay. You know, there's a few people, but
even if you include the high deductible and everything else that's going on,
I would still say arguably there's a few. But I'm going to say, Jack, it's less than 10% of our population, and probably less than 5
is better off
under this particular law as it's crafted. Yeah, no, it's a small number, and I have brethren that would say, Craig, it's like 3%. You know. But I'm being as
it's got to be pretty
balanced
low.
as I can be.
It's got to be pretty low.
It's really low because the economic argument would be you're only better off if you happen to be at 2.5 times the federal poverty or less, and that's a pretty low threshold, and that's not a lot of people,
right?
Because those people get a huge subsidy.
Now it polls better than that. I mean, there's a higher percentage of people that say they like Obamacare, but I think that's the percentage of people that are liberals who believe in wealth redistribution, and they're not in a better situation, but they're fine with other people.
Even calling it Obamacare, it's the same percentage of people that generally support President Obama.
Right, exactly.
Because a lot of people just don't understand. I teach an insurance benefits class at UC Davis, and we've started the summer.
It's the line out the door.
We're going to bring you in as a guest lecturer next week, Zach. But these are HR professionals that work in benefits, and I'm always amazed at how we'll have 20 people in that class, and really after 2 weeks of class, I have people coming to me and saying, I do this for a living, and I had no idea how complicated it is until I sat here through 2 lectures, and I've seen what's going on. This is blowing my mind.
That's what major bureaucracies get you. Nobody understands what's actually happening.
This is bureaucracy care, guys. It's not SCOTUS care. SCOTUS has saved it twice. Congress manipulated it to get it through. But the bureaucracies have changed it 30 to 40 times. You know, you've got IRS, HHS, DOL. They've all issued regulations, tweaking, amending, creating exceptions. I mean, you've got every big federal body, every part of our federal government has manipulated this thing.
They've substantially rewritten it.
I'd call it federal care or bureaucracy care.
Well, I heard Kennedy's prostate's the size of an apple, and he just wanted to keep his health care going.
I see.
That's what was going on there.
I see.
Very uncomfortable sitting there.
Oh, it's terrible.
Weak stream.
Among other things. Frequent, going and going, as the commercial puts it.
Right.
Craig Gottwals, Craig the Obamacare lawyer, will have a link to his, your blog or your website or something like that. Yeah, at ArmstrongandGettyRadio.com. If you are completely befuddled by the modern world of benefits and insurance and the rest of it, get in touch.
Thanks for bringing in donuts, which ensures I will need more health care sooner.
Yeah, free insulin for all.
Fantastic. What's coming?